Hi everybody, welcome back to Making Stuff with Mrs. Baroody. I'm Mrs. Baroody, and today we're going to be talking about weaving. This is weaving part 1, and there will be another video that's going to be weaving part 2, okay? If you've never done any weaving before, or if you haven't done it in a while, I would start with this video. We are going to build a loom to make a basic rectangle sort of woven piece here. And I've added some details, we'll talk about that later on. But again, if you've never done it, this is the one you want to start with, okay? I'm going to have a lot of different materials, I'm going to give you lots of tips, and it's going to be super fun. Let's go. Alright, ladies and gents, so talking about weaving, I'm going to show you the first loom. It's a pretty basic one. It's something you might have used even if you didn't make your own, and it's something that I think is easy for everyone to at least start weaving on. The next one I'll show you is a little bit more complicated. So to make your own loom, you really just need a piece of cardboard, not too thick, something that's easily cuttable, some yarn and string, or other things, and we'll go into that in a little more detail in a few minutes, tape, a pencil, scissors, and if you want to be a little bit more exact, you are also going to need a ruler of some kind, okay? So I'm going to move some of this stuff out of my way. Let's start with making the loom. So this is a piece of cardboard. You can see it's pretty thin. This was some Monster Energy drink my husband drinks. Gross. So for this, we need to make some notches at the end so we can string our string. And the string that's going to go on our loom, that's called the warp. Those are those vertical lines that are going to go up and down. And then the yarn that we're going to weave through it is going to call the weft. And if you are like, I'm never going to remember that, it's okay. I'm going to save them in a Google document so you guys have that vocabulary. So warp, vertical, weft, horizontal. So we are going to make some cuts in here. When you're making your loom, you can have as many strings as you want. The more strings you have, the more complicated patterns you can create. The one thing you want to think about is you are going to need an odd number of cuts on your loom so things will line up the right way. I like to use a ruler for this just to help me out, make sure things are even. If you are not sure, or if you don't have a ruler, as long as you have an odd number of cuts and they line up with the ones down here. So I can't make a cut here and a cut here and expect them to line up. That's not going to make any sense. So I'm going to take my ruler. I love this clear one that I have because it has these lines that line up right with the edge of the cardboard. And my cardboard is about 5 inches and a little bit. I'm not worried about the little bit. So I could do 5 tick marks. That would give me an odd number, but I want to make it a little bit more complicated than that. So what I'm going to do is do it on every 1/2 inch. So I'm going to make a mark 1/2, 1, 1/2, 2, 1/2, 3, 1/2, 4, 1/2 again. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Awesome. I have an odd number. I'm not worried that there's extra space over here because eventually our thing is going to come off the loom and no one's ever going to see that. But this is something that's important. I'm going to make these lines a little darker so you can see. When we measure things like this and I move to the other end, I have to make sure that things line up. So I'm going to put a 1 there. That's how I know I started. That's my starting. You put an S for start. I'm going to turn this over. So if you look down here at the end, my 1 is here. That means I have to start measuring on this side for the top. Because if I start over here, we're going to have things that don't line up. We want them to line up perfectly. So I'm going to take my see-through ruler. And I'm not really concerned about the numbers. I'm more concerned about the lines. So I'm going to line up this with the edge of my board, and again at the 1/2 inch. So 1/2, 1, 1/2, 2, 1/2, 3, 1/2, 4, 1/2. So that should line up. So now I take my ruler and I line it up with both sides and see if my line makes sense. Yep, I made a straight line down. I think that's going to work for us. So now I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to make a cut on each of those tabs. I don't want to cut a huge amount into the cardboard, but if I just do a teeny tiny snip, that's not going to do me any good. So I like to make mine about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch into it. Okay, so it's going to be about that far, a thumbnail in. I'm going to do that on each of the tick marks. And again, we're not looking for absolute perfection. Just do your best. If you have to come back and make things a little longer, then you have to make things a little longer. It's all good in the hood. So I'm going to keep cutting on my tick marks, being careful I don't cut my fingers. You can see I'm holding it far away from where I'm cutting, just to be safe. And there we go. Okay, the next part, things get a little trickier. When we start talking about the string or the yarn we use for our warp, the thing that we're going to be weaving on, I like to use a thinner sort of string or yarn. If you use something thick, you can. I just think it doesn't work out as well, especially if you're a beginner weaver. Okay, so I'm going to put this string inside of my tape. So when I turn it, it stays inside and doesn't roll around on my table. So I'm going to take a piece of that tape. Before I do that, actually, boop. I'm going to take my string and I'm going to put this on the back of this. This is going to be my front. I like to keep this part nice and clear so I'm not distracted by all of that. So I'm going to take my string and slide it through that first slot, and on the back I'm going to tape it and make sure that it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to stay right where it needs to be. All right, now when we're doing this, you do want it to be kind of tight, but if you pull it really hard, you're going to have a curved loom, and we want it to be nice and flat. So pull some string off the roll and I put it in the part that I cut. Okay, again, we don't want to pull it tight. We don't want it to be curvy. Now, this is where some people make a mistake. I'm not going to take this string and go across the back like this. All I'm going to do is loop it around on the back through the next hole. Okay, let me show you again because I don't think that was quite on camera. I'm going to take the string and I'm going to put it around the back side through the other hole. Okay, so back to the other end, into that little slot, keeping it kind of loosey-goosey. We don't want it to be really tight. And I'm going to keep repeating that over and over again. So I've wrapped it around the back side, go into the front, not pulling too tight, wrapping around the back side, and I'm just going to keep cruising. Boop, boop, boop. All right, so here's my finished loom. You can see that I've taped it on the back, and they loop every other one on the back and go straight on the front, okay? As long as yours has straight lines on the front, looped on the back, you are in good shape. And again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You need an odd number of cuts, so you have an odd number of strings. All right, so I'm going to choose a color to tie on, and let's use this red because why not? You don't want tons of yarn, especially if you're just starting. So I like to hold the yarn ball sort of in my fist at my armpit, and then I stretch and stretch and stretch in my hand until I can't stretch anymore. So this in my armpit, and then this I stretch out, and that should be about what I need. So 1 arm length of yarn. All right, now it doesn't matter which side you start on. I like to start on this side away from my dominant hand just because. So I'm going to take my red yarn, and I'm going to be gentle, and I'm going to tie it to my white yarn. Okay, tie it on. Not worried about that extra string right now. I'm just going to kind of hold it out of our way for now. And I'm going to use some tape because it's easier if this has kind of a harder thing to hold on to make it go through the warp. So I'm going to take a little bit of tape, stick it to my yarn, and then just kind of roll it up inside and give it a little pinchy pinch. Okay, so this part will help us go through our loom. Now, patterns. If you are a beginner, keep it simple. Just do over, under, over, under, over, under, all the way across. Then you're going to do the opposite the other way. So you're creating a pattern over, under, over, under, over, under, and then you're going to repeat the opposite the other way. So I'm going to take my string. I'm going to count this first string as over because it's kind of tied on top, right? So I'm going to take my tape. I'm going to go under that one, over the next one, under, over, under, over, under, and then over. And then I'm going to pull. And I'm going to pull until it's tight. Now, as you're weaving, if you keep pulling too tight, see how that string's moving? Everything's going to squish into the middle and it's not going to look nice. So I'm going to take my fingers and sort of push this up. We push the weft up so we have things nice and tight. So I have gone over this one. That means on the way back I have to go under. So over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, and then pull, pull, pull till you can't pull anymore. I take my fingers and smush it up. Okay, so you should start seeing a pattern emerging. Under, over, and it's going to be the opposite. So one more time before I move on to the next thing. This is under. That means with my yarn, I have to go over the first one, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over. And you can see I like to go all the way across, then pull. Again, not too tight, just till it stops. Use my fingers to smushy smush up. And I'm going to keep going till I'm almost out of red. Until I have maybe an inch or two left. Then I'm going to take my next yarn, whatever it might be. Maybe I'll use some green. Maybe I'll even use, this is cloth that I cut into strips. I could use that. I could even use ribbon to tie on. So when we tie things on, it's just like when we tie our shoelaces. We make an X, give it a twist, make another X, pull it through, and I've knotted it. But just to be safe, I like to double knot that bad boy. Double knot it on. Now, I don't need these things just flopping in the wind there. So I'm going to trim, whoop, throw my scissors, good to go. And I'm going to keep on weaving. Again, I can put tape on here if it's going to help me out. When you're all done, you are going to take it off of the loom, okay? And all you're going to do is untape the back side, and then you're going to pop off each of the loops, and you're going to do that on each side. And when you're done, you'll tie off the end down here, and when you pop it off, you'll have a beautiful weaving that looks like this, right? So you can see here's my red yarn. I use this green, it's almost like rope stuff. I use some of my cloth, and then I use some ribbon that I might use on a package. Nifty. And then on the back, what I did is I hot glued on some popsicle sticks so it's a little bit more sturdy, and I had pom-poms, so why the heck not? Threw some bad boys on there too. So now I can hang this from the popsicle stick if I wanted to, or I can hang it like this. It could lay flat on something. I wouldn't necessarily use this for a pot holder. Some of this yarn is not safe for heaty things, but it could be a little coaster, right, for your coffee cup or something. Another way you can make a loom, I showed you how to measure it. I'm going to show you one more way to make your loom. This was the loom that I made for the weaving I just showed you. Okay, and I even wrote on it back, so I knew that was the back. And those are my slots all the way across. To do this, I had a bigger piece of sort of this nice white cardboardy paper. And what I did is I took a rectangle book, I put it on the paper, I traced around it, loop, and then I cut it out so I had a rectangle paper. Okay? So if you're worried about things being perfect, nice crispy edges, use a book. Use a cookbook. Use anything that's sort of rectangular. Okay? You could make it skinny, as fat, as big as you want, but I wouldn't start too much bigger than about this. Okay? Maybe a little bit bigger than your hand to begin with. Alright, so that is sort of the most basic way to make a loom and weave. Those of you that want to practice some crazier patterns, I'll throw it up in our Google Classroom, some patterns you can follow. Okay, and next I'm going to show you something that's weaving but a little bit out there, and I think you'll like it.